My name is Angela Rourke. I'm a Major General in the United States Army. And on a cold Sunday evening in October, I was handcuffed by my own brother in our grandmother's dining room just before his captain walked in and saluted me. The moment Kyle slammed my face into the marble floor, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I remember the crystal chandelier above swaying ever so slightly as the chaos unfolded beneath it. 21 members of my extended family watched as the so-called black sheep was dragged from the roast beef and mashed potatoes like a criminal. "You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and unlawful possession of military property," Kyle declared, his knee pressed into my spine. The handcuffs were too tight intentionally, but the burn was nothing compared to the sting in my grandmother's eyes. Her name was Margaret Rourke. She was 87 and dying slowly in a wheelchair, with oxygen tubes in her nose. But even then, her voice still had steel in it. "Kyle," she said, "what are you doing to your sister?" That he answered standing tall in his pressed Fremont Falls police uniform, "Is not my sister. That's a con artist who's been lying to all of us for years." He had prepared for this moment, his grand reckoning. Surveillance photos, phone records, even the military uniforms he found in my apartment during a wellness check. Kyle had always wanted to prove that I was nothing, a fraud. A girl playing soldier with government money and a chip on her shoulder. And for a brief, blistering moment, he had them convinced. But what Kyle never considered, what none of them had considered, is that there are some uniforms you don't buy. You earn them, quietly, with blood. With choices that have no applause, only consequence. So when the front door burst open and 6 men in dress blues entered with boots that rattled the hardwood, Kyle's certainty faltered. And when Colonel McKenna's voice echoed across the dining room, "Step away from General Rourke," my brother finally understood what it meant to mistake silence for absence. And what it costs to betray someone trained, never to flinch. I was never the kind of daughter Fremont Falls expected. While other girls wore cheer uniforms and curled their hair for homecoming, I was memorizing the NATO phonetic alphabet and sneaking copies of military strategy books under my mattress. My mother called it a phase. My father called it unbecoming. But Kyle just smirked like he always did, as if I were some elaborate joke only he understood. He was 3 years older and born exactly to spec varsity quarterback prom King Police Academy scholarship. He walked into every room like it owed him something. And Fremont Falls, the whole dusty town with its Friday night football rituals and backyard barbecues, gave it to him gladly. I was the question mark no one had time to answer. They called me intense, said I read too much, said I asked the kind of questions that made people uncomfortable. By the time I was 16, I could strip and reassemble a rifle faster than half the boys in Kyle's unit. I didn't brag about it. I just knew how. Some things felt intuitive, like how to listen to a room that didn't want you there. When I got my acceptance letter to Westview Military Academy, I didn't tell anyone for 3 days. I carried the envelope folded in half inside my hoodie, rereading the words over and over, like they might vanish. When I finally told my parents at dinner, Mom blinked twice and said, "Angela, that's not a school for girls." Dad cleared his throat, didn't meet my eyes, and offered me a slice of meatloaf. Kyle didn't say anything until after dinner. He found me out back, sitting on the old porch swing Grandpa built before his stroke. "You'll never make it," he said flatly. "You don't have what it takes. They'll eat you alive." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because something in me already knew I wasn't going there to be liked. I was going there to disappear from a family who had never truly seen me. At Westview, I did disappear for a while. Into the grind, the heat, the relentless pace. But something else happened too. I grew sharp. Learned how to stay invisible. When it mattered, how to speak. When the room was ready to listen, how to lead without raising my voice. I came back a different person. But to them, I was still just Kyle's little sister. The one who didn't settle down. The one who didn't come home for Christmas. The one who never said what she really did. And after a while, I stopped trying to explain. Because the truth was, they didn't want answers. They wanted proof that I'd failed. And nothing unsettles a family like silence that refuses to apologize. I left Fremont Falls at 18 and never once looked back, not because I didn't miss it, but because I couldn't afford to. The first year at Westview broke a lot of people. The cold, the hours, the silence. You learned quickly that no one cared about where you came from, only how far you could go without flinching. I liked that. It was clean. Brutal, but honest. For once, my worth wasn't filtered through Kyle's shadow or my parents' tired expectations. It was measured in endurance, precision, discretion. When I graduated, I went into military intelligence. Not because I wanted secrets, but because I'd been living inside one my entire life. The people I worked with didn't ask why I didn't call home or why my family thought I was just consulting. They didn't care. They just wanted the job done. And I was good at it, better than most. Over 7 years, I moved through assignments that didn't exist on paper. Sometimes I'd vanish for 6 months, sometimes longer. My name never appeared in the news. I lived in safe houses with reinforced doors and walls lined with satellite feeds. I learned 4 languages, briefed generals behind closed doors, coordinated extractions that no one would ever thank me for. I was promoted fast, not because I was ambitious, but because failure in my line of work meant body bags. Back home, they thought I was drifting. My mother told people I worked in logistics. My father said I had some sort of government gig. Kyle told anyone who'd listen that I was probably living off Dad's retirement fund. He never asked, just assumed. Sometimes I'd go back for a funeral or a birthday, sit quietly at the dinner table while Kyle boasted about arrests and citations while my mother passed him another slice of pie like he'd won a war. No one asked what I'd been doing. They were more comfortable with the lie. So I let them believe it. It was safer that way, for them, for me. The only one who ever looked at me like she might see more was Grandma Rourke. She never pushed, never pried. She'd take my hand during dessert and say, "Whatever it is you do, Angie, just keep coming home safe." She never needed details. The hardest part wasn't keeping the secrets. It was knowing that no one ever noticed there were any to keep. I could have disappeared entirely, and I don't think it would have changed the story they told about me. Until Kyle decided to write one of his own. A story where he was the hero. The one who finally caught the fraud. The one who protected the family from the sister who dared to be more than they could understand. He built that version of me like a case file, and one dinner invitation later, he decided it was time to present his evidence. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Thick paper cream-colored, addressed in my grandmother's careful cursive. Just seeing her handwriting stopped me mid-briefing. "Dearest Angie," it began. "It's been too long. I'd love to have all the grandchildren together this Sunday. Just dinner, just family. You'd be doing this old woman a great kindness if you could come home." I reread it twice. My grandmother never begged. She didn't trade in guilt or expectations like the rest of them. She was the only one who never tried to mold me into someone more convenient. If she was asking, it mattered. Still, I hesitated. I was at Fort Calhoun, 2 floors underground, reviewing satellite intel on a volatile border zone when her letter landed on my desk. I had more pressing things to worry about than mashed potatoes and family small talk. But something about her phrasing lingered just family. Like she knew how much weight that word carried for someone like me. That night, I called her from the baseline. "Grandma, it's me." "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed. "So you got the letter?" "I did." A pause. "I won't ask for details. Just come, wear something nice, and let them see you. I want them to see what I see." Her voice wavered slightly, but there was resolve in it too. "I'll be there," I said already, calculating leave protocols and travel windows. By Thursday, I had a rental booked and a dress laid out. Nothing in uniform, nothing official. Just a simple black sheath and heels I hadn't worn in years. I packed light as always. 1 carry-on. 1 folder of classified work tucked into the lining. And the letter. The plane touched down at Lansing Regional. Cold. Damp. The kind of Midwestern autumn that smelled like burning leaves and unsaid things. The drive to Fremont Falls was automatic cornfields and Silo's old diners, 1 gas station that hadn't changed since I was a kid. I passed Kyle's cruiser on Main Street, parked prominently, engine running, like he wanted people to know he was on duty, even off the clock. Grandma's house looked the same. White porch swing, blue shutters, rose bushes barely holding on to their last bloom. When I stepped onto the porch, I saw the table set through the window, china out, candles lit. She was going all in. When she opened the door, her smile cracked through every layer of dread I'd built up on the drive. "You look wonderful," she whispered, cupping my face. I stepped into the hallway, the smells of roast and cornbread folding around me. But the moment I crossed that threshold, I felt it. The stillness, the arrangement of chairs. The way Kyle's voice was just a little too loud from the dining room. I wasn't walking into dinner. I was walking into a performance. Dinner started off deceptively normal. Grandma sat at the head of the table, her pearl necklace, perfectly centered hands, folded in her lap like a hostess from another century. I was seated between Aunt Marianne and Cousin Joel, making polite conversation about renovations and weather. Kyle sat across from me, 2 seats down, carving his roast with surgical precision. But his eyes never left me. The first sign something was off came when dessert was cleared early. No coffee, no second servings of peach cobbler, just silence thick enough to cut with a blade. Kyle cleared his throat, sat back in his chair, and folded his hands like he was beginning a deposition. "So, Angie," he said loud enough for the entire table. "Still doing consulting?" I didn't blink. "Something like that." He chuckled, the condescension barely hidden. "Because I've been curious. You've been gone, 8 months? And yet no one seems to know exactly what it is you do." My aunt gave a nervous laugh. My mother reached for her water glass. "I travel," I said simply. "And yet there's no record of your employer." Kyle continued tapping a manila folder that had appeared beside his plate. "Nothing online, no public database, not even a LinkedIn." "Kyle," Grandma's voice was low warning. He ignored her. "You know what else I found?" he asked, opening the folder. "Photos. From that wellness check I ran at your place last year. Dress uniforms, medals. Some of which, by the way, are illegal to possess, unless earned through active service." My breath stayed even, but my stomach turned cold. He stood now, his voice rising with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to our family, "I believe Angela Rourke has been lying to all of us. For years. And tonight, I intend to put an end to it." I saw the moment Grandma's hand trembled on her napkin, saw my father shift uncomfortably, saw the shame and anticipation ripple through the people who'd spent their lives believing Kyle was the responsible one. I stood slowly. "Kyle, you don't know what you're doing." "No," he said, pulling out the handcuffs with practiced ease. "I know exactly what I'm doing." And just like that, he stepped forward, ready to arrest his own sister in front of the only people who ever made her feel invisible. The handcuffs clicked. Cold steel too tight. Kyle's fingers pressed into my wrist with deliberate control. Somewhere behind me, someone gasped. A fork clattered to the floor. Grandma said my name, but her voice sounded far away, like it had to fight through layers of disbelief. "This is a federal offense," Kyle announced to the room. "Impersonating a military officer, possession of government property. I've gathered months of evidence, surveillance, documentation, and tonight we do this by the book." He turned me toward the entryway, his grip too firm, his voice proud. That's when the front door slammed open. Hard. With force that made the windows tremble. Boots thundered across the hardwood. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The weight of their steps was unmistakable, purposeful, coordinated. Kyle hesitated. Then Sergeant Rourke, a voice barked sharper than any command I'd ever issued. "Stand down, immediately!" I turned just enough to see him freeze. Standing in the doorway was Colonel Joseph McKenna, flanked by 5 officers in full-dress blues. Their uniforms weren't store-bought, their ribbons weren't replicas, and their presence wasn't symbolic, it was absolute. "Let go of her," McKenna said. Calm, cold, final. Kyle's hands dropped. He stepped back confused, scanning their insignia, like he was trying to place them in a hierarchy he didn't understand. I'm handling a local matter. This woman is under arrest for what," McKenna cut in, stepping forward. for serving her country with distinction in ways you'll never comprehend. He turned to the rest of the family, eyes sweeping across faces now drained of color. This woman is Major General Angela Rourke, current assignment classified, 7 years of service, 3 deployments, intelligence clearance above your jurisdiction. The room went dead silent. Kyle stared at me, mouth slightly open, as McKenna stepped closer. You've just handcuffed a decorated officer during an active federal assignment. Your actions, Sergeant, have consequences. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." But I didn't speak, didn't cry. I just looked my brother in the eyes and watched the truth undo him. Because for the first time in his life, Kyle Rourke wasn't the one giving orders. He was the one about to be removed. Kyle stood frozen, the handcuffs still dangling from his fingers, like proof of something he couldn't take back. Colonel McKenna didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of an entire command. You've interfered with a federal intelligence officer under operational protection. You've conducted unauthorized surveillance, and you've compromised multiple active protocols. Kyle's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Major Silva stepped forward, retrieved the manila folder from the dining table, and flipped it open. "This is what you built your case on," she said, her voice dry. "Photos of General Rourke entering a secured building, surveillance logs without chain of custody. A report written by a small-town sergeant who never once contacted federal channels," I thought Kyle finally croaked. I thought she was lying. "No," I said softly. "You wanted me to be." Behind me, the silence from our family had curdled into something heavier shame. My mother had her hands over her mouth. Aunt Marion looked like she might be sick. Even my father, usually stone-faced, stared at the table as if afraid to look at me. McKenna turned to them. Every absence, every unanswered question, every vague explanation wasn't to deceive you. It was to protect you. He looked back to Kyle. "And you turned that protection into betrayal." Kyle stepped backward, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know." McKenna's tone turned to stone. "You didn't want to know." For a moment, I thought Kyle might collapse. But he didn't. He just stood there, smaller than I'd ever seen him, as the officers escorted me gently out of the room and left him standing in the wreckage of a version of me he never bothered to understand. 3 weeks after the dinner, a formal request came through the legal liaison's office. Kyle wanted to meet. No press, no family, just the two of us. I said yes. Not because I owed him anything, but because I needed to look him in the eye and make it permanent. They brought him into a secured briefing room just off Fort Calhoun. He wasn't in uniform anymore. Just a wrinkled shirt, hollow eyes, and the look of a man who'd finally realized what he'd broken could never be pieced back together. "I was jealous," he said without preamble. "You were everything I wanted to be, respected, important, real, and I couldn't handle that you did it without anyone clapping for you." I didn't respond. Not at first. "You weren't trying to protect anyone," I finally said. "You wanted to see me reduced to something you could understand. And when I didn't shrink, you tried to crush me." He flinched. "You didn't just embarrass me, Kyle. You compromised operations. You endangered lives. You turned your own family into collateral." His voice cracked. I didn't know. I stared at him. "You didn't ask." He sat in silence after that. There were no excuses left, just the truth sitting between us, dense and undeniable. "You want forgiveness," I said. "But what you need is consequence." When I stood, I made it clear. I won't block the charges. I won't advocate leniency. Whatever justice decides, you will carry it alone. He didn't argue. At the door, I turned back one last time. "When they sentence you, don't say my name. Don't blame family. This wasn't about me. This was about you. And what you couldn't stand to see in your own reflection. That was the last time I saw him. These days, I command operations across 3 continents. I still serve, still protect, still carry secrets, but I no longer carry their silence, because I've learned that family doesn't always mean loyalty, and sometimes justice isn't loud. It's walking away without ever needing to look back.